It's nearly impossible to believe that a country like North Korea exists in the modern world. Over 26 million people trapped and essentially held hostage by a brutal one-party totalitarian dictatorship. Kim Jong-un, the supreme leader of North Korea, is worshipped by millions as a deity. He rules with absolute power, using propaganda and an iron grip on information to control the population. This leaves the outside world to piece together the unbelievable harsh reality of life within North Korea's borders. The history of Korea leading to the division into North and South is marked by both ancient traditions and modern geopolitical pressures. Originally a unified kingdom for over a millennium, Korea was annexed by Japan in 1910, leading to a harsh period of colonial rule until Japan's defeat in World War II in 1945. Post-World War II, Korea was divided at the 38th parallel into two zones of occupation, with the Soviet Union taking control of the north and the United States taking the south. In 1948, separate governments were established in each zone. The Democratic People's Republic of Korea, led by Kim Il-sung under Soviet influence, and the Republic of Korea, supported by the United States. The Korean War from 1950 to 1953 followed, with North Korea invading the South, aiming for reunification under communist rule. The conflict ended with an armistice in 1953, but no peace treaty was signed, leaving the two Koreas officially at war to this day. But how did North Korea become known as the most oppressive dictatorship in modern history? Kim Il-sung, known as the Eternal President, implemented Juche, an ideology promoting self-reliance, which gradually isolated North Korea from much of the world, including its former Soviet allies. Kim Il-sung's rule was characterized by a centralized control over the economy, extensive propaganda, and a security apparatus designed to quash dissent. He led North Korea during the Korean War, which solidified his control and deepened the ideological and physical divide between North and South Korea. After the war, North Korea initially saw some industrial growth, but by the late 20th century, the economy began to stagnate and eventually collapsed, leading to a devastating famine in the 1990s. The famine in North Korea, also known as the Arduous March, is one of the most devastating periods in the country's history. The exact death toll from the famine is difficult to determine, but estimates suggest that hundreds of thousands, possibly millions of North Koreans died from starvation or related illnesses during this time. Despite these hardships, when Kim Jong-il took over in 1994, he maintained strict control over the population through intense indoctrination and surveillance. However, the famine acted as a catalyst for many North Koreans who began to flee the country in search of food and freedom. This opened the floodgates for thousands of North Korean defectors. The most obvious destination for escape is South Korea. Not only because it's geographically close, but also because South Korea claims the entire Korean peninsula and has a Ministry of Unification. This means North Korean defectors are automatically granted citizenship in the South. That is, if they can make it. Despite Seoul being only 60 kilometers from the border, the demilitarized zone between North and South Korea is the most fortified border in the world, with high walls, electric fences, landmines, and heavily armed guards with shoot-to-kill orders. This makes this route virtually impassable, although there have been known cases of successful defection. One of the most dramatic stories of a North Korean defector who crossed the border into South Korea through the DMZ involves a soldier named Oh Chong-song. In November 2017, Oh Chong-song made a daring escape by driving a military jeep directly to the military demarcation line. Abandoning the jeep, he sprinted towards the border while North Korean soldiers opened fire on him. During his escape, the vehicle lost a wheel and crashed. Abandoning the jeep, Oh Chong-song sprinted across the military demarcation line under close-range gunfire from North Korean soldiers. One of the soldiers violated the 1953 armistice agreement by briefly crossing the South Korean border. Despite being shot multiple times, Oh Chong-song managed to cross the border, collapsing on the South Korean side just meters away from the military demarcation line, and was rescued by South Korean and US soldiers. Having lost half of his blood from 5 gunshot wounds, he required immediate surgery upon arrival at the hospital to save his life. His defection was a significant event, highlighting the extreme risks North Koreans are willing to take to escape the regime. The footage of his escape, captured by security cameras, was widely broadcast, drawing international attention to the perilous conditions in North Korea and the bravery of those risking their lives in pursuit of freedom. The other option, besides trying to escape straight south through the most fortified border on the planet, is to take a risky voyage by sea. One notable escape story involves a North Korean family who fled the regime in 2007. The group, consisting of 3 men and a woman, managed to escape North Korea by crossing the Sea of Japan in a small wooden boat. Their journey began from the northeastern coast of North Korea, where they set sail with limited supplies and without modern navigation equipment. The group faced numerous challenges during their journey, including rough seas, strong currents, and the ever-present risk of detection by North Korean patrols. After 6 days at sea, they eventually reached the shores of Aomori Prefecture in northern Japan. Japanese authorities found them, and eventually they were settled in South Korea, recognizing the immense risks they had taken to seek freedom. In September 2011, the Japan Coast Guard found a wooden boat containing 9 people, 3 men, 3 women, and 3 boys. The group had been sailing for 5 days and eventually arrived at the Noto Peninsula, while their intended destination was South Korea. Despite a few successful escape stories, fleeing North Korea by sea to Japan remains a rare and highly dangerous option. Because the North Korean regime tightly controls maritime activities, and most North Koreans do not have access to boats capable of making the journey across. Boats that are available are often small, poorly maintained, and not equipped for long-distance travel. The same conditions are true westward of North Korea in the Yellow Sea. Lee Chul-un, a high-ranking official within the North Korean Ministry of State Security, was dissatisfied with his life and the oppressive regime, so he decided to defect. On the day of his escape, he and his friend were carrying an inflatable tube and essential supplies. They chose a night with bad weather to avoid detection, knowing that the rough sea conditions would make it harder for patrols to spot them. Their journey began by infiltrating a coastal area, heavily guarded with electric fences and landmines. They had to navigate through these obstacles carefully, using their knowledge to avoid triggering alarms or stepping on mines. Once they reached the sea, they swam for 8 hours, enduring cold waters, strong currents, and the constant fear of being caught by North Korean patrols. During the swim, they faced multiple challenges, including exhaustion and cramps. At one point, Lee's friend experienced severe cramps, making it difficult for him to continue. They helped each other stay afloat and motivated. Eventually, they reached a small, uninhabited island, where they took a brief rest before continuing their journey. They used a makeshift raft to paddle further until they were finally spotted by South Korean military personnel. The South Korean forces, monitoring the area, detected their heat signatures and sent a boat to rescue them. Lee and his friend were then taken to a South Korean naval base for interrogation and processing. After confirming their identities and the legitimacy of their defection, they were granted asylum and began their new lives in South Korea. The last option involves going opposite your intended destination, north, at the 1,300-kilometer-long border between China and North Korea. But this isn't a walk in the park either. Defecting from North Korea through China has become increasingly difficult due to enhanced surveillance and bilateral agreements between the two countries. China's advanced surveillance system along the border and throughout the country makes it challenging for North Korean defectors to evade capture. China and North Korea have also an agreement that mandates the repatriation of defectors if they are caught. These defectors, considered illegal immigrants by China, face severe punishment upon their forced return to North Korea, including execution or worse. Despite these obvious dangers, some defectors have taken extraordinary measures to escape. In a very famous incident in 2004, 44 North Korean defectors, including men, women and children, some disguised as construction workers, stormed the Canadian embassy in Beijing, seeking asylum. Upon reaching the embassy, they climbed over the walls to gain entry and request asylum. This event drew significant international attention about the desperate measures North Korean defectors are willing to take to escape the oppressive regime. But the number of North Korean defections has drastically decreased in recent years, especially since 2020, falling to less than 100 per year. This sharp decline from the thousands of defectors seen during Kim Jong-il's reign can be attributed to several factors. Firstly, the North Korean regime under Kim Jong-un has significantly tightened border controls. More extensive security measures, including increased fencing, CCTV surveillance, and landmines along the borders with China and South Korea, have made it much harder for defectors to escape. Additionally, the COVID-19 pandemic led to even stricter border closures and travel restrictions, further reducing the opportunities for North Koreans to defect. During the pandemic, North Korea sealed its borders completely, making it nearly impossible for defectors to cross into China or other neighboring countries. And also, North Korea has experienced some economic stabilization compared to the severe famine of the 1990s, which drove many to flee. While the economy remains extremely fragile, modest improvements have lessened the immediate desperation that spurred mass defections during Kim Jong-il's era. Despite these harsh measures and relative economic improvements, the fundamental issues of repression and lack of freedom continue to drive those who can find a way to escape. While it's not literally impossible to escape North Korea today, the extreme challenges and dangers make it feel almost out of reach for those who are brave and desperate enough to try.